This is about reviving our community. So we wanted the commercial property sector to get a good idea as to what happens in the charity world, and we're trying to link the two groups together. Councillor Bessa Mahfouz is a Labour candidate in the Borough of Ealing. He is also an Ealing Labour Cabinet member for safety and genuine affordable homes. Plus, he's got a double hat on today actually. He's the CEO of a Kingston-based charity which is benefiting from rent-free space that complements their own main site that they have in the borough. Jessica Craig is Policy Officer at the Power to Change, which is the social change organisation that strengthens communities through community business. She works on policy development and building relationships with central and local government. Quick introduction. So A-Stop puts a stop to wasted space. We're like a property agency. The one thing that we do is we get rent-free space for charities. That's it. That's all we do. And we do that by working with landlords who have got spaces that are either going to be rented, converted, and we convince them that it's actually cheaper and better for you and the community to give it to us rent-free on a temporary basis, and then that way we can work our magic with the charity sector. One of our big charities we work with is Temporary Use Aid, and their sole goal is to give out rent-free space to charities, and their biggest brand that they have is Rainbow Rising, which is their public-facing brand. So although we work across retail, office and warehouse, a lot of the branding that you see around you is all about what we can do in all of those types of spaces. You can see a bit of a pattern here where empty rates are getting harder and harder to avoid. The consultation was purely about rates avoidance and evasion. There was no comment in that consultation about what are your ideas to revamp the whole system. So it looks like these sorts of things. This is probably quite a good summary. So already ineffective is the artificial managed insolvency, which Jerry mentioned. The temporary reclassification to agricultural space. We put a question mark on that because some councils will let it ride because it's too hard to fight. Other councils will be like, I'm sorry, you can't have a snail farm in Lincoln's Inn Field, it's not going to go down well. And Camden Council will take you to court and have done successfully. The Guardian programme doesn't work anymore. But I will say one thing though, and there is one guy from the sector in the room, it is still a good option if it suits the building and you're really worried about things like squatters and frozen pipes. It works well, and we work quite closely with that sector as well sometimes. But you can't really put a Guardian into a shopping centre with a shop and put a shower in there. So it doesn't always suit every building. 6 weeks occupation to reset the clock and get the empty rates relief again. Again, it's been crossed out there because it does not work in Wales or Scotland anymore. The same item is still listed here for England only. So as I say, whilst the building is unoccupied, you can get relief. You can try and make your building a listed building, but nobody really wants to go down that road. It's going to be complicated for your life. Try and get the valuation office to reassess the space to less than 2,900. It does work if you're going to take a space like this and slice it into really, really small rooms. But in the City of London, you have to go really tiny to be able to get it that low. So these are factually accurate, but pretty hard to actually implement these three over here. And again, as I say, you can still do the 6-week, 43-day thing in England, but we don't know for how long. And this is something that I picked up in a conversation with one of Jerry's colleagues originally a few days ago is, well, the best way to not pay empty rates is to make sure it's not empty. So actually cut a deal, which was the whole idea for this incentive. Cut a deal with a retailer, a leisure operator, whoever it is, go down lower on the rent, give them a rent-free period, support them in some other way if you can. And you're going to hear more from Matt later on with his long game ideas, which is that kind of mindset. And I think it's a good one to have. And then, of course, there is the charity sector where we can try and plug the gap because charities, the biggest problem they face outside money is space. They can either don't have the space to be able to run the project or any other stuff that comes with it. So if we can help the charity sector who get busier during hard times along that journey, then that's kind of the way to go, really. Brilliant. Okay, we're going to move on now. So, just a quick reminder not to shoot the messenger. So I'm going to ask Jess to come up in a moment. So we've seen that the consultation's been issued. We're now going to hear a bit about what's the public sentiment, what's going on in political circles, and the best person for that is Jess at the Power to Change. So I'll hand over to you, and then we'll hear from Bassam as well.
Thanks, Shailesh. As it was kind of mentioned at the beginning, I work for Power to Change. We are a social change organisation that supports community businesses. So those are the sector of business that's locally rooted and locally accountable, and they trade for community benefit. At Parish Change, we know that community businesses strengthen their local communities, and so we're here to back them through all of the changes and challenges that they face. And in my role, I work with local and central government to develop new policy ideas and make the case for how to change to benefit these amazing types of business. Our sort of interest in this area around the broad theme of the session around reviving our communities, and also the specific interest in business rates, stems from the role that we see community business having in the restoration of the vitality of our high streets. So their work really gets right to the heart of that issue of reviving communities. But like many charities, and so community businesses, some of them will be charitable, but they take lots of different legal forms and business models. So you get the likes of sort of community interest companies too. But like charities, one of the sort of the major challenges they're facing is access to space to do the great things they do. So our sort of belief around this role for community business in the high street is based around the fact that we've seen the decline of a retail-dominated model of high streets, and we don't think that's coming back. And so we're recognising an opportunity for a more diverse offer with services that are geared to meet local needs and create destination spaces that then increase footfall to other local businesses. And with their sort of deep community roots, community businesses are really well placed to deliver this. So they understand and can deliver on what people want and need in their local area, on their high street, and they also support the local economy by reinvesting their profits locally. A lot of community businesses take on otherwise vacant spaces and bring them back into beneficial community use, which in turn helps to make the high street more attractive, more lively. However, a lot of them are facing challenges in accessing affordable space to rent or to buy. A lot of them have ownership aspirations, and when they do, high business rates can be a huge challenge to their business model because a lot of them are operating at low margins. They're really focusing on delivering their offer at an affordable rate, and a lot of them are also active in deprived areas. So in recent years, we've been campaigning to kind of highlight this role of community businesses in transforming high streets and ensure that they can access the space they need to build their businesses. And for us, tackling the exploitation of business rates and this loophole around periods of short reoccupation is a logical way to make more spaces available for communities to use and to ensure that local authorities can collect the income in rates that they need to deliver local services. As has already kind of been introduced, and I think it's up behind me, councils are losing a huge amount of money from these sort of business rates avoidance loopholes. So 250 million in rates collection that's missed every year. And this idea of box shifting, so short periods of reoccupation, is the number one method of business rates avoidance. So we, just at the end of last year, we published this little document. Basically, as a sort of policy-focused person, I'm really interested in how we can influence the next government to make changes that support community businesses. And one of the changes that we suggested in here was that they back this campaign to ban box shifting. And so I'm really pleased that over 100 councillors and MPs in England from across the political spectrum have also backed that campaign. In my role, I went to the party conferences in autumn of last year and heard from both Labour and the Conservatives that they do understand the need for business rates reform, but it is my sort of ardent belief that that is going to come far too slow to help a lot of the organisations that need change now. So notably for us, despite the significant social and economic benefit that community businesses generate, those that are not registered as charities are not eligible for any sort of mandatory business rates relief, even though mainstream businesses in hospitality, retail and leisure, all sectors that community businesses are active in, can access a 75% relief. We do see a lot of community businesses accessing discretionary rates relief from their local authorities, but with so many councils hitting financial difficulty, a lot of that's being withdrawn quite rapidly. And as I was sort of saying, with the sort of small margins that they operate at, big business rates bills on these spaces that they occupy that are otherwise empty can be, really unaffordable. So again, within this document, another of the big policy changes that we are asking the next government to make is to introduce a 75% business rates relief for community interest companies and community benefit societies, which are among the most common forms of community business. And the reason for sort of choosing those models is that they are asset locked, so you can kind of prevent any sort of exploitation. My final point would be for those sort of contemplating how to use vacant assets, to just think about that, you know, working with the local community and working with community businesses in your area, if you have any, and think about how that can maximise the social value that your space can deliver as well as economic return, because I think they're really great sort of in the middle of generating both social and economic productivity. And I'd be really happy to chat about some of our ideas and our work with you after. But for now, I would like to introduce Bassam, who's going to kind of give that perspective, both from the kind of councillor perspective, as well as someone who's actually running a charity and using a space that you got through ASOP, as I understand.
Great to be here, thanks for the opportunity. And so, as I've been introduced, my name is Bassam Mahfouz. I'm a councillor in Ealing. I'm a cabinet member and have been for over a decade, and covered a number of different portfolios. So everything from environment, but led on finance, which included business rates. And then in terms of supporting businesses in my last portfolio, I'm now responsible for housing. And in May, on the 2nd of May, I'll be standing for the London Assembly for Ealing and Hillingdon. So with that hat on, I think absolutely that this challenge I've seen time and time again with, you know, talk about the finances that Jess referred to there, £250 million of lost revenue to local authorities. Just to put that into some, and over half of that is put down to this specific issue of box shifting. So to put that into a bit of context, that would build you 2,000 new council homes in one of the biggest housing crises facing the country. We could create 150,000 new hospital beds or build 12 secondary schools with that sort of money. And the reality is that local authorities have been facing significant cuts over the past 14 years, and at one point that looked like for every £1 that councils used to get from central government, about 64p in that pound had been cut. So if that is you or I, the sorts of decisions that you'd have to make, if your income was cut by that amount, you'd have to make some really serious decisions about what you could and couldn't afford. And so local authorities are no different. They've had to look at things like dimming lights, closing children's centres, which are obviously critical services for young people, older people's day centres, libraries, introducing additional charges. Now, most of you, wherever you live, anywhere in the country, you'll have heard of some of these, if not all of them, being impacted on your local authority. We're now hearing almost on a week-to-week basis local authorities serving what is in effect a notice of bankruptcy, because they are most of them are on the brink of bankruptcy, if not there pretty much already. And if this continues, it will just get worse. But as I said, I'm standing for the London Assembly myself on the 2nd of May, and we're going to get a quote up in a bit from Leonie, who I'll be hoping to join on the Labour group, who talks about the benefits of banning box shifting and making the legislative changes that are necessary. And the London Assembly recently wrote to the Department for Local Government to ask for those legislative changes to come about. The benefit is that, of course, you know, the obstacle to change is you might know you want to get rid of something because it's awful, but what do you replace it with? Well, the reality is actually Wales and Scotland have already dived in with both feet, and so we've got a couple of templates there that could be taken off the shelf. Do you want to talk about the charity stuff now? Or do you want me to
save that for later.
Save that for a bit later.
Thank you.
All right, but I think, you know, absolutely, you know, we touched upon it, and I'll talk about it in a bit more detail. But absolutely, one of these great opportunities through this which is a real win-win-win, is to support the charitable sector with as an alternative, legitimate way of dealing with empty property. So I'll leave it there for now, and I'll come back to that a bit later. So thanks.
Just picking up on some of the quotes, we've had communications with Camden Council. Slightly strong language on their part, but I guess this is their viewpoint. Whilst the practice of box shifting is unquestionably unethical, there is no legal recourse. So it's picking up on the point that they don't like it, but they can't really change it. That's from Camden Council. And it's £10 million alone for that one borough is the impact that thing has had. We've mentioned the £250 million here, the 100 plus councillors and MPs that have acknowledged that something needs to change. If we could have the next slide, please. So these are some of the headlines that are coming out as well. So the public sentiment, I guess post office is everyone's mind at the moment, and then the mass push that's come off the TV program. So the public sentiment is there. And when you see someone like the Standard picking up on a topic like business rates, it's because they feel it's something that is in people's hearts as well. So that's one of the headlines. Obviously, Barnet Post is not as big a name as the Standard, but you know, they've all got their views as well. Next slide. Bassam mentioned it earlier on. So a member of the London Assembly has said, look, this needs to change. It doesn't matter. It's just got to change. We've got to follow an example. Someone's already doing it. So someone's put in all the hard graft. We should just move on this. So just a quick recap. These are the things that are no longer effective. This is what you can do when something is empty. And as Matt has said, look, get someone in. That's kind of really the best thing you can do, short term and long term. So I'm just going to jump to the next slide now. So we're now going to tell you what we think is going to happen. So again, best guesses on our part based on everything that we've heard, the input from Jess and all that sort of stuff. So we think the 6 weeks will become 6 months for England. So we'll focus on that in the next few slides, but that's probably the hottest one of them all in terms of what's like to change. And that's, as Jerry said, if it gets changed at all. There is talk about 3/6 months being reduced to 3. So the industrial guys who get 6 months rates relief, that might be cut back to 3. More power given to councils. Again, I think that's just a natural trend that's going to be progressing. So that's probably one. Putting a 1-year time limit on insolvency and liquidation, so you don't see the Debenhams and the paper chases sitting empty for many, many years after they've closed down. I guess the same goes for Wilcos as well. Remove any reclassifications to the agricultural space. That's because some councils will fight the fight, some won't. They just might make it law just to say that just doesn't work unless you've got, for example, planning sorted out. Clearer rules from the VOA as to how much of a strip out do you need to do to take something off the rating list. So again, this space will start getting stripped out this weekend. How much they have to do to get out of the list completely, it's a bit of a hard fight. And the VOA is very strong, but they're very much behind as well. So sometimes you will not find out for quite a long time. Tighter checks on qualifying for small business rates relief. That's a bit of a mind blower. If you're interested in understanding more about that, please catch me or Jerry at the end of this conversation. But it's too much detail for now. Time limits on new builds. So sometimes you'll see a brand new block of flats, shops on the ground floor just seem to stay empty, never been occupied. And correct if I'm wrong, Jerry, but they don't pay rates until they first come into occupation, I think is the rule at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, again, another complex area, but councils can serve completion notices, which doesn't force a developer to actually do any works, but it makes an assumption that works will be completed with a certain time limit, and then empty rates can kick in. So there are rules, but very complex area.
Okay. Oh, my mind is blown already, so we'll move on from that one. And then, of course, this is the one that we're here for, is to try and help you get your head around ethical empty rates mitigation work, and please help the charity sector as well. So I'm going to take you through some of those. Okay, so the current situation, and hopefully you guys are into graphs. If you have a rates bill of 100 grand between day 0 and day 365, you'll pay 100 grand in empty rates. That's the blue line. The more you save, the lower these costs will be. So the gap is what you're interested in if you're a landlord. So currently you have the option of the box shifting thing. So you pay rates for 43 days, and then you'll pay an agent a fee, a small amount of money to help run the operation of moving things in and out. And then you do it again, pay rates for 43 days, pay a fee, 43 this. And this is the thing that was being referred to as box shifting or Bluetooth device using. So we can show you the next graph. So basically, we've tried to show you what's the difference between these two mechanisms. So the red line is if you work with a stop and the charity sector, you'd be roughly the same over a period of time. Sometimes we're faster in terms of getting rates relief because it starts on day 1. Sometimes there's less admin with us. Sometimes it's the other way around. So all in all, it's about the same at the moment. This big drop here is a lesser known tax break. So if you are a UK tax paying landlord, you'll get a tax break. So this is the interesting thing with the taxman. Although he's penalising landlords for empty buildings, and Jerry is totally spot on, there are other tax breaks that are there and exist to help the charity sector. So one of them is, if you donate space to a charity for a year, they will give you a certificate. The charity can give you a certificate saying, thank you for the space. I know you could have charged me, say for this floor, £150,000 in rent over the course of a year, but you've charged us nothing. Here's a bit of paper saying thank you very much. You can take that piece of paper, put it on your tax return at the end of the year, and reduce your taxable profits by 150 grand. So although you haven't handed any money over, you're getting a big tax deduction. So you take the tax rate times 150 grand, that's about £35,000 of hard money in your pocket. This is on top of the business rate saving. So when we talk to an accountant who brings this angle in and introduces that to the property sector, that, as I say, is when magic happens. And that's why you'll see the costs drop off dramatically at day 366. You don't have to commit to that front. It doesn't work for pension schemes and REITs because they don't pay tax. But if there is a UK tax-paying landlord, this is a very less known benefit that's out there for you. Can I have the next slide, please? So if England copies Wales and Scotland and moves the 6 weeks to 6 months, you'll have to pay rates for 6 months, 183 days. So that's about 50 grand out of the 100 you have to pay. And then you'll get your 3 months rates relief, and then you'll do it again. So the next graph will show you that this is not as good as it used to be. So the box shifting model is basically broken in Wales and Scotland. So people don't do that anymore, generally speaking, out there. So the gap between the blue line and the red line is much more viable, basically, in this situation. So again, everything else stays the same. Is everyone okay with that? Do they get it? Brilliant, thank you. Okay, next slide. Right, this is where we're going to bring in a couple of other people as well. So we've talked about money quite a lot. There are additional benefits. So the money we've talked about, that's great. The 2 tax breaks, we've mentioned one already. Will's going to bring in another one in a little while. Insurance, lights on, and charities become a rent-paying tenant. So we're going to cover off some of these quickly, and I'll introduce Himesh probably next. Charities have gone on to become rent-paying tenants. This is very much like with Matt's experience with tenants in Poole who have gone on and said, okay, you know, we've made this work over 2 years. We now can afford to pay a rent and rates and be here in the long term. Some of the charities we've helped, for example, in Birmingham, we've got half of a 17-story office block, which would have become a hotel, but COVID hit. And so the landlords changed their mind. And although people like Yellow Pages or Yell have moved out and Regis has moved out, they are basically bringing office organisations back. So in the meantime, we've put in about 6 or 7 different charities. Everyone from Mind that wanted to base in the city centre, and a whole bunch of other lesser-known names as well. Some have now been embedded in the community so well and so strongly, they've been able to attract grant funding to become proper rent-paying tenants. So at that point, whether it's Birmingham, Bishop Auckland, West 12 Shopping Centre a long, long time ago, those charities have become rent-paying tenants, which has probably flipped the profitability of those centres to the degree of about £250,000. So again, it's a bit like what Matt does. If you give someone a bit of a chance to embed themselves and prove their worth, they will deliver value to you. So that could be a charity, it could be another social enterprise, or just a normal corporate as well. Benefits of lights on, there's more people that will come to your shop and therefore shop at the other shops as well. And with the lights on, your shop might become more viable as a potential tenant. So we used to do a free bookshop in Eastleigh, and it was so popular that a Cafe Nero came along and took the space off us. So we kind of became a victim of our own success. But that's a good thing because we bought that viability and noticeability as well.